My name is Bakker. I'm an anthropologist. I work at the University of Amsterdam in the Department of Anthropology. Um, I teach applied anthropology to a certain extent, by which I mean that I think that it's really important that even in an academic training like anthropology is at a university, students need to be aware of what one can do with a study like anthropology outside of academia, because most students will end up outside of a university. So it helps a lot if they are aware and confident and have an understanding of what it is that they might be doing. I have this interest because part of my own work before I started working at the university, and actually right now as well still, is also still applied work. I do academic research, but I really enjoy doing research that has a purpose or that answers a question that somebody is waiting for, and that's good fun. And the final thing I think is also that if you're teaching something, you need to know what you're doing. And if I'm teaching a class and I refer back to research that I did 8 years ago, 8 years ago, those students were not even in high school probably. So that's in the Middle Ages for them. So I want to keep up and have recent research to refer to also, first because I enjoy it, but secondly also to make sure that students have the idea that the person who's giving a class actually knows what he's talking about and not just basing himself on a bunch of books. My first research was in 1996. That was research for my, what would now be my master's, and that was about the impact of tourism in an island in Indonesia. I haven't really stopped since, so that's a lot of research. Um, I think I've been working mostly in, Indonesia, the Netherlands, a little bit in Nigeria and Kenya. In terms of subject, a lot of it in Indonesia has to do with land conflict or resource conflict. In Indonesia, Nigeria, and Kenya, it's all about militias and the role they play in societies there. In the Netherlands, it is much more about social legal issues, so about how people perceive norms to be used, about what is allowed and what is not allowed. Um, and as you can guess, all of these subjects are to some extent sensitive and also mean that certain people will be involved or not involved. If I'm thinking about social inclusion and exclusion in Indonesia, for instance, a lot of it moves around ethnic lines, the conflict there, or sometimes also religious lines. And that means that, it definitely plays a role who you are, where you're from, and to determine what your position in society is. And in that sense, it also makes a difference if I'm doing that research, because of course I'm not Indonesian at all, and I have no way of pretending that I am. So then, as very definitely as an outsider, who doesn't have a role or a position per se in that society, it means that to some extent I can do research and do things that an Indonesian researcher could not do, because I'm weird and foreign and potentially harmless. On the other hand, of course, an Indonesian can get information which I will never get, because I am weird and foreign and not in the culture in the way that they are. So I could go on for a long time, but social and exclusion plays a huge role, I think, in the type of research that many anthropologists do. That has been happening for, I guess, about 7 years now, maybe 8, maybe 6. Effectively, what was going on was that a few of us, started to realize how many anthropologists or how many of our students actually end up working in jobs that are not academic, and that are good at that, and that there are many jobs out there which anthropologists can fit in. but how little attention there actually is for the place of such job and such work within the curriculum. And that's not so strange. It's an academic training. It's being taught by academics. And in academic career mostly implies that you're very good in working at academia, doing academic things, which means you don't work outside of a university. So there wasn't that much of that experience in the first place. And insofar as it was there, it was also quite important to realize that for many academic anthropologists, it's about that work. It's not about what else is happening. Those are other people doing other things. But we figured, well, be that as it may, it is still very important that we give our students the possibility to understand what's going on outside of the university and the variety of things and issues that they may actually work on. And what we started to do, firstly in the master, was set up an applied track, as it's called. And in there we partner with outside partners, which means it can be a company, an organization, a government institution, whatever. And they bring in an issue, a mystery, a problem that they want solved. So they have a research question and they want an answer. And our students then help them solve the problem and provide an answer. But it also means, of course, asking them, like, okay, so why do you want an answer to this? And how come you have this question? And what do you actually want to know? So in part, it's also researching their partner, if you like, to find out what is really at stake there. And the result that we hope for is that they then come up with a thesis for us, that's an academic thesis, which shows that they are well versed in academia and know all the trappings that a fully fledged master in anthropology should dispose of. But at the same time, that they also provide a report, a presentation, whatever they want for that outside partner in the language and style of that partner. So without 10 pages of theory and without Foucault and all the high-flying thinkers, but perhaps in bullet points, which is something that academic anthropologists are not taught to do, to come up with such firm conclusions. So if you can write in such a style and actually dare to formulate your findings in such a way, as well as explain all that you've done in terms of anthropological theory, well, then you speak two languages, then you can translate between the two, and then you dispose of certain skills which we think are very valuable. So that's what we're trying to do. That's something that has quite taken off in the past couple of years. Also, new courses have been developed that incorporate the applied elements more throughout the years. So there's quite a number of colleagues who engage with the subject now. Speaking for me personally, it initially started off with the development of that applied track in the master, which I already mentioned, and with a course in the first year, which I was asked to teach, which was called Doing Anthropology. And it's a course at the end of the first year, a short course. It's only 8 sessions, I think. And because it's the end of the year, it means students are tired, looking forward to the summer. And they have had all these large theoretical courses to go before it. And then this course is about what anthropologists actually do, how they make a living, what sort of careers they end up in. And we do essentially 3 things in that course. Yeah, quite a busy course. We do 3 things. We have, if you like, talk shows with, a varied number of anthropologists who work on all sorts of different careers. From the top of my head, what I remember from recent years is we have somebody working with an NGO, somebody working as a journalist, somebody working for parliament or for government, somebody doing a medical career, someone who's with the army, all sorts of potential directions. And also we try to make sure that it inspires or annoys students, to put it that way, just to make sure that they don't think like, oh yes, of course they're going to be academics or they're going to work in musea or all the obvious things. We also wanted to think about the broad spectrum that anthropologists can fill. Second thing we do is we have a research program in there called the pressure cooker, which means they have 1 week to provide an answer to a question posed by an outside party. It's an outside party because we want it to be real, not just essay number so much that they write for us as supervisors. No, there is somebody who really wants this answer. And that's, well, yeah, that gives a bit more pressure, hence the pressure cooker. And also we want them to realize that one can actually do research in a week, especially if they're a team, if there are multiple people involved. Because of course, they always get taught, well, anthropologists, yeah, they do research, takes a year, easily, maybe 2, which is true ideally. But of course, that means a lot of money. And a lot of people asking for such research want the answer now, or in a month, but not in a year from now. So it's important to realize that there are methods that can be applied and that anthropologists can actually work in a relatively short amount of time. And kind of in the background of all of that sits a book which they're supposed to read. The book is called Anthropologists Wanted. 2 anthropologists who do not work in academia and myself wrote that book because there wasn't a book like that in the market. There were a couple of books that kind of did what we were looking for, but they were very much US based, and yeah, we're in Europe, different place. So we wrote a book about, yeah, essentially, first off, what is anthropology? So something that might be interesting for high school students who are considering doing anthropology, but also to give a bit of a basis for first year students who kind of want to thinking, okay, what is it that I'm doing? Then it has, throughout the book, interviews with anthropologists in a variety of careers. We look at what an academic career might be like. We look at what people seeking to hire anthropologists might be looking for. We look at the type of methodologies that anthropologists use and the difference between working in a university and working outside of that. We look at fields in which anthropology is being used, or different forms of anthropology that are usually not included in academic careers, but that are huge outside of it. So it's kind of a book that is there to inspire and to give a broad idea as to what it is that people can do once they graduate. And what I myself really like about that course is that we usually also give the program of these presentations by the anthropologists we invite to the 4th year students, the graduate students, who by then are writing up their thesis. And quite often they join. So you have 4th year students joining the 1st year students. And for the 1st year students, this is like, okay, end of the year, what is it that we're going to do years from now when we graduate? For the 4th year, it is right. I started up with this, and yeah, let's see what I see in this now and how I'm thinking about it currently. And I like how that course, and to some extent also the book, provides a bit of a circle in that way of connecting both people starting off and people on the verge of graduating. And that's 1st and 4th year, and 2nd and 3rd, there are also courses that implement a lot of research for, let's say, outside parties. I don't teach those, and I've never taught those, so I do not know them too well. But I do know that by now we have attention for applied anthropology throughout all of the years. By scholars, I guess you mean people working in the university. I think it helps if they have an understanding of what's going on outside of academia, outside of the university. It helps if, in their role as teachers, they are sympathetic to the issue that students may well not end up working in academia. And as such, it's very useful if they incorporate that in what they teach their students, or at least pay attention to it. And so create awareness of how what it is that they are teaching them fits in with anthropology outside of the university. That's not to say that they shouldn't teach extensive courses on theory, philology, Foucault, what have you, but that it helps if they're aware that outside of the university it might be slightly different world. Confidence in what they can do, and that there's actually a place and a career waiting for them, because there usually is. An understanding of what it is that they might be able to do, and the sort of careers that they might find there. And training and awareness, by which I also mean that if they step out and they end up in a job interview and somebody asks them, "Ooh, but you're an anthropologist. What do you think you can do for us?" That they do not need to say like, "Well, I can theorize about the issues that you're asking about, or I can critically engage with the policies that you're making," but that they can actually say like, "Well, let me tell you, I can do research, or I can look at the policies that you are in use, and I can come up with reinterpretations based on the answers that I find when engaging with your employers or your employees, for instance." So in other words, that they are able to translate what it is that they've learned in the university into the language and into the needs of the people that they're talking with. Quite steadily and quite excitingly. There's a rather large number of anthropology students each year that graduate. Very few of them end up working at universities, and quite a lot of them work in careers in which they feel themselves working as anthropologists. Um, the interesting thing is that usually in universities, people lose track of what goes on outside of there. But there are a number of meetings, a number of organizations, I believe, in which these people meet. And what I'm finding is that there's a lot of attention for it coming out of employers as well. So it's growing quite steadily. It's not as well known yet as it might be, but I think that is partly due to anthropology being a relatively small field, well, small academic study. And it's not since that long that it's being taught as applied anthropology here. Well, I think anthropology can have a lot of value for society because anthropologists study what people do and why they do it. And of course, that means that they try to find out what their interests, their beliefs, their fears, their hopes, and so on and so forth are. All those elements that shape lives and that make that people do things or interact in certain ways. And that means that such an understanding can be very useful in formulating policies, for instance, for a government, or for helping people to understand what is actually going on and work against social tensions. Or in all sorts of ways help people smoothing out issues in society. This is happening to some extent, and not enough, if you ask me. Partly anthropology is clearly to blame for that itself, because it's a bit of an inward-looking world to some extent. And partly there simply aren't that many anthropologists. So that means that in, for instance, many policy studies, it's people who studied political science, psychology, law perhaps. And nothing wrong with that, clearly, but it's a different way of thinking and a different way of looking for answers to the questions. So I could say more anthropologists and the world would be a better place, but that's not necessarily what I'm implying. But I think that anthropology can do a lot in solving daily issues and broader issues in societies at large. Oh yeah, but there's so many things that could be improved, of course. You could improve social cohesion, you could improve the way people engage with the environment. You could try and, if I bring all of that together, I think it would be nice if there's, or it would be good if there's a greater understanding and specifically a greater trust of people in one another, I think. Because if there was such a thing, if people would trust what others are doing, it might also mean that there would be a broader shared conscience or a broader shared feeling of what makes sense. And by that, I then mean so elements as environmental consciousness, which might actually be a good thing for the earth, but at the same time also how environmental consciousness is also kind of a luxury at this moment. Some people can, it's not so hard to afford to be environmentally conscious, for others it's really hard. So if you would end up with more social equity, perhaps social understanding, that might do quite a lot to solve larger issues. Well, this is very much wishful thinking, I guess, and very theoretical or very impossible, perhaps even. But you ask what I would like if I had the possibility, and I think that's, yeah, I would like that if it were at the tops of my fingers.
And what are you going to do about it?
I'm going to teach a lot of students about how things might matter and how they perhaps may have some influence in that. I'm trying to put it in my own work and my own research in the way that I advise outside parties. And I make sure that I am an environmentally conscious person and hopefully a person who's nice to the people around me. I think it's important to realize that working with an NGO, but of course also a government institution or any outside parties, quite often they are looking for very concrete answers, for specific insights to deal with the problems that they are working with. That means again that answers should be to the point, they should be clear, they should address the issue that they are asking for. But of course, it's also important to keep in mind that they work generally out of a specific agenda, which means that it is possible that you come up with findings which do not suit their agenda, and that might also mean that some of your findings, or all of your findings, are not used. But that's beyond your control as a researcher. If you agree to do the research and then you deliver the findings, and what happens with the findings is, yeah, up to the party that requested them. The advantage of academic anthropology is that it thinks about theory and it thinks in theory. And often people working outside of a university don't have the time or the headspace to really engage with that. And that means that a university, an academic anthropologist, can be a wonderful place to develop new theory, new ideas. And NGOs and other institutions, for me, come in usefully to kind of keep the academic thinking somewhat in track as well, because it can become wonderfully abstract and wonderfully philosophical, which is great in its own right. But for it to have applicability, usage in the world outside again of the university, it helps a lot if it is being formulated together with outside partners, concretely working with these issues.
And where does the applied anthropologist sit in that field, do you think?
Between the two. Well, basically, because an applied anthropologist generally has theoretical knowledge and an interest in the stuff, otherwise, they wouldn't have studied anthropology. But they are far more, or not necessarily, but often they're more than academic anthropologists triggered or working in using their knowledge very specifically, very concretely. And that's, of course, where, again, the interaction with other than academic partners comes in. They could translate, actually, kind of, between the two worlds. Anthropology, of course, is often about understanding people, what people do, and researching that. Art is a way in which people express themselves in another form than in speaking or in writing. And that means that the expressions as they are formulated or put forward through art might be something that can be interpreted or studied through anthropology. And in that sense, art can be another medium than just text or spoken words or formal discussions can be. So it's difficult to say what it will deliver, but it's always exciting to have the two come together and see what happens. I think it's an exciting and very original endeavor. Um, the way in which you combine various styles of engagement, boot camps, essays, art, obviously, and that in various places in Europe, yeah, in the world, if you like, using different media, very concretely being on a spot and talking to somebody else, but also using the internet and the website and so on. It means that it's a very nice way, I think, to introduce anthropology and then an exciting take on anthropology to the world at large and see what that brings in terms of interaction, understanding, and usage of both anthropology and its implementation in the various subjects that you're working on. What I think is interesting about it is that you're working with teams from three different countries. And of course, you could say, well, they're all European, so it's all one culture. But the interesting thing, I think, is if you look at the subjects, and then you find that the subjects, as they're being presented by contributors from the Netherlands, and those from Portugal, and those from Romania, all have quite different understandings of what is actually going on. The focus is different, the way they write about it is different, and that means that, at least I think, that means that you can grapple with what it actually is that you're doing when you're talking about these large themes and how they are being understood, applied, and made sense of in these different contexts. And you can say that, yeah, okay, it's all Europe and it's all one culture, but well, no, apparently not, because the issues seem to be quite different, even though you're using the same denominator to talk about them. First of out of interest and out of curiosity. It's not, if you compare it to, for instance, dentistry or perhaps law, a study that gives a very clear and guaranteed career path. But it's interesting, and it brings you new perspective, new insights. It will get you a job. I just can't tell you what the job is or how that will work out. And of course, that also depends a lot on the individual and her choice of what she wants to do with her life. So do it because you think it's a good idea.
And what do you think is interesting about it in a full sentence?
Um, the insights, the understanding, and the application that it gives you about how human societies exist and interact with one another.
And so, if you would say full sentence, you would say one should study anthropology because. If you could repeat that.
um, One should study anthropology because one is curious about people and their existence in the world.